te tāwara o te kupurau ko koro o tōna kōrero. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just before I invite the Minister to the stand, I'd just like to welcome you all here for, no doubt, is an exciting moment for people that are gathered here. But just to go through the housekeeping rules, in the event of the fire, if you should hear the alarms going, we just please vacate how we came in. We'll go down through the stairs, down to the ground floor, where we'll be guided by our security guards. And we'll gather just outside the Seddon statue there. In the event of a medical emergency, please try and refrain from calling 111. We'll actually call on security and they'll take it from there. In case of an earthquake, drop cover and hold until it stops. Pretty hard to try and stay away from the windows, but we just encourage you as best as you can. Once it's finished, we'll then move the same way downstairs, exiting, following our security people, and take us out to the Seddon Hotel. The toilets are located on this floor. As you go out the door, they're 3.1 and 3.6 in the executive wing, just on the way there. No smoking on the parliamentary precincts. As I like to say on our marae, for those that smoke, there's a place called Chatham Islands. That's ideal. In terms of phones, particularly with the speech that is about to follow, could we just ask if you could please have them all on silence? Nō reira, tēnā koutou e te whānau, tēnei te huri atu, te rākau kōrero ki tō tātou minita. I'd now like to invite the Minister, the Honourable Stuart Nash, to the stand. Kia ora.
This is the difference between an immigration speech and a tourism speech. If it was tourism, we'd be giving you a nice Hawke's Bay red. Here you get tea and coffee. Tihei Māori ora, tui te whakapono, tui te tuamanako, tui te auraha, tui te hunga ora, ki te hunga ora, tihei Māori ora, ka nua te mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for being here tonight. For those of you who don't know Chris Farfoy, I am not him. Chris is unfortunately at home ill, and so I am standing in his place. But it's a pleasure to be here as I outline the government's plan to improve New Zealand's immigration system. I'd like to take the opportunity to outline the government's planning to improve New Zealand's immigration system and ensure it delivers better outcomes for our communities and our economy. COVID-19 has presented enormous challenges, disrupting travel, trade, family ties, and I want to acknowledge that from the start. When the Prime Minister talks about the team of 5 million, we are well aware that there are some players within that team who have done it a lot harder than others. But it presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change some of the shortcomings in the way that we've been doing things, and that includes the way we've been managing immigration. Migrants have always and will always play an important role in New Zealand society. They make a valuable contribution and significant contribution to our community and our economy, and they enrich our country. There are thousands of cases of impressive achievement academically, in business and in sport. Where would the All Blacks be without them? Not to mention those here in Parliament like my colleagues Apito William Seo, Priyanka Radhakrishnan, Maya Lubeck, Ibrahim Omar, Nasi Chen, Venusia Walters and others in our caucus who are proud to serve New Zealand and call this place their home. But getting our immigration setting right is a balancing act. There are multiple facets at play, including humanitarian, social and economic objectives, along with our international commitments and New Zealand's annual UN refugee program, which resumed at the beginning of this year. We also take seriously our commitments and responsibilities to other countries, notably the Pacific Islands through the recognised seasonal employer scheme, which provides valuable income and improves the wellbeing and livelihoods in the Pacific. The Pacific Residence Program and family categories are also part of that immigration balance. But it's also about managing the benefits and impacts of immigration as one of the levers for achieving the outcomes we want for New Zealand's economy. This means getting the right mix of people and skills to ensure we're meeting our economic objectives, minimising pressure on our infrastructure, such as housing, and ensuring Kiwis have job opportunities. When we get this balance right, our immigration system enhances communities, it builds economic growth and develops people's skills. It provides opportunities for high-value investment in New Zealand and attracts highly skilled workers to our shores. This boosts knowledge, skills and technology sharing, supports businesses and entrepreneurship, increases our connections to the world and creates jobs for all Kiwis. Parts of our system have been performing well, and we want to retain and strengthen these areas to make them as effective and efficient as possible. But while we've been progressively moving to reduce our reliance on lower skilled migrants over time, we've still seen significant population growth, one of the highest in the OECD, driven in large part by migration. COVID has put a brake on this, and again I want to acknowledge the difficulties that has presented for so many people in different ways, including our migrant families who have been separated by the COVID border closures. We are working on solutions as circumstances allow, as we've just done with the new border exemptions for families for separated healthcare workers. We will continue to look for ways to broaden these sorts of measures. Wider still, we are working on how to better manage future migration in a post-COVID world. We want to ensure a better balance that will allow us to build the foundations for the future. Higher levels of migration have contributed to 30% of New Zealand's total population growth since the early 1990s. This has been fuelled in particular by increasing numbers of temporary migrant workers and students. Temporary work visa holders make up almost 5% of New Zealand's labour force. This is the highest share by a significant margin compared to other OECD countries. Poland is next with almost 4%. Increasingly, these temporary workers are at the lower school levels. Nearly half of all essential school visa approvals in 2019 were for the two lowest skill levels. This means businesses have been able to rely on lower skilled labour and suppress wages rather than investing capital in productivity enhancing plant and machinery or employing and upskilling New Zealanders into work. In the decade prior to COVID-19, we saw the number of people on temporary work visas in New Zealand double, from fewer than 100,000 to more than 200,000. We've also seen an increase in demand for residency in New Zealand, with the vast majority of applicants already being onshore. For example, around 80% of applicants for the skilled migrant category come from onshore applications. But research by the likes of the Productivity Commission and the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research shows we can support New Zealand's economic growth and well-being by making improvements to our immigration system. The OECD in particular has said that the employer-assisted temporary work visa system is not limiting recruitment of migrants to resolving genuine skills and labour shortage. It's attracting too many low-skilled migrants and may be weakening incentives for employers to employ and train New Zealanders. This has limited our ability to create jobs and improve productivity. Last year, our immigration system, as we knew it, was brought to an abrupt halt. In March 2020, we closed our borders to everyone but New Zealand citizens and residents in order to keep COVID-19 out, keep New Zealand communities safe, and keep our economy operating. In normal times, we would see more than 7 million people enter New Zealand each year. In the 12 months from March last year to March this year, just 165,000 people came in. That was a 98% drop in arrivals and a 96% decline in departures prior to the Trans-Tasman bubble. This has greatly affected many sectors of the economy, such as international education, tourism and hospitality. It's created labour shortages where the usual source of temporary and migrant seasonal labour has been constrained. It's seen much of the immigration workload shift to assessing applications for border exemptions and providing advice and options for criteria around border exemptions for various sectors, as well as implementing extensions and other variations to visa conditions. Since June last year, we've been able to let in over 8,000 critical workers. This has allowed us to accelerate our recovery. We've welcomed CEOs, engineers, financiers, research and development practitioners, digital and IT specialists, agricultural workers and film industry people to support New Zealand's economic growth while our border is closed. Opening up quarantine-free travel with Australia and now the Cook Islands has opened up new options. Last week we announced that over the next 10 months, thousands of skilled and critical workers will be allocated spaces in MIQ to help provide a boost to key sectors. These include a further 2,400 RSE workers by March next year to help prepare the harvest, pick autumn and summer fruit, harvest grapes and prune through winter. The new MIQ allocations also include 300 specialised construction workers between June and October to help progress key infrastructure projects such as the Auckland City Rail Link, Transmission Gully and the Christchurch Convention Centre. And we'll be putting MIQ spaces aside for 400 international students in June, underscoring our commitment to the international education sector, which is important to the country's long-term recovery. The government will continue to look for more options for border exemptions to help accelerate our COVID-19 recovery as we continue to plan what reopening the borders might look like. While the pandemic continues to rage, and we have seen what's going on in India in recent weeks, we need to maintain what the Prime Minister has described as a phased approach to our COVID response plan. Quarantine-free travel with Australia and the Cooks is part of that phased reconnection with the world. And there will be more to come, but again, as the Prime Minister has explained, while the vaccine rollouts are incomplete, the number of countries New Zealand can safely open up to will be limited. A reset is not merely about numbers, it's also about ensuring we have the right incentives to support the growth path we want in our post-COVID recovery. It also isn't a single piece of work. It will be an ongoing process made up of multiple projects. One key initiative we confirmed tonight is our investment attraction strategy to encourage high-value international investment into New Zealand. The strategy will guide our approach to attracting high levels of productive investment to help establish, grow and scale New Zealand-based businesses, to increase the flow of ideas and talent to our shores and strengthen our international connections as we prepare for the future. We want targeted high-quality investment that establishes frontier firms, brings skills and technology to New Zealand. We've already created border exemptions for the Innovative Partnership Program and New Zealand Trade and Enterprises Investor Program to enable representatives from global companies to come to New Zealand to conduct on-the-ground negotiations with companies they wish to invest in. These border exemptions will enable over 200 people representing high-value international investment interests to come to New Zealand over the next 12 months to conduct due diligence and transact the sort of deals we know will play an important part in supporting New Zealand's economic recovery from COVID-19. Investment through these programs will create highly skilled jobs, enable the valuable transfer of knowledge and technology and increase international connectivity for New Zealand firms and allow us to position ourselves globally. We're also looking at other ways to attract people wanting to make large, long-term investments in businesses and jobs here that will contribute to New Zealand's international recovery and our economic recovery. And I hope to have more to say on that in due course. In further process changes, we are taking steps to address immigration systems to make operational settings simpler, easier to use, automated where applicable, and remove room for confusion as much as possible. These changes will take time, but we want a better experience for the people who deal with New Zealand's immigration services. As we focus on reopening New Zealand's borders, we are determined not to return to the pre-COVID status quo. One key focus of the reset will be temporary workers, partner worker rights, and the skilled migrant category visa settings. Temporary work visa reforms are designed to give more flexibility to migrants filling highly skilled roles, and the reforms will strengthen both the minimum employee requirements and the labour market test to be met before a worker can be hired. Reforms such as the temporary work visa changes announced in 2019 will come into effect this November, and in line with the OECD's recommendation that we require employers to be accredited to recruit migrant labour and meet standards of good practice in order to be accredited. Further objectives of these temporary work visa changes include supporting employers to access the skills and labour they need, ensure that temporary workers are only recruited for genuine job shortages, make the immigration system easier to navigate, and improve the way immigration, education, skills and welfare systems work together. Again, this is in line with the OECD recommendations that we ensure checks confirm that migrant labour is only recruited where there are genuine shortages. And we'll be reviewing the skilled migrant category with more to say about that soon. COVID-19 has enabled us to look again at whether we've got the new settings right or whether we should go further. There are no plans at this stage to change specific purpose, short-term business or visitor visas, the working holiday schemes or non-partnership family and humanitarian categories. We're also taking action to tackle migrant exploitation. The exploitation of temporary migrant workers, such as paying less than the minimum wage or making workers work excessive hours, is unacceptable and breaches New Zealand law. A whole of government enforcement response has already been taken to combat migrant worker exploitation. Since July 2016, the Labour Inspectorate has successfully taken 81 migrant exploitation cases to the Employment Relations Authority. An increasing number of joint compliance operations have been carried out between Immigration New Zealand and the Labour Inspectorate, together with other agencies including Inland Revenue, WorkSafe and the police. We've also made policy changes in recent years to ensure better protections for employees, including migrants, and we've committed an additional $50 million over 4 years to focus specifically on migrant exploitation in New Zealand. We want to send a strong message that no form of exploitation is acceptable in our country. We're going to set up an 0800 number and a new online process for notifications, and this will be available from the 1st of July this year. To a certain extent, we've already set the scene for a reset with the type of border exemptions and the criteria of those exemptions were put in place since COVID-19 border closures, such as requirements to pay workers the living wage, have industries provide plans for recruitment, training, and providing career paths for people in their industry. The government is playing its part with vocational trades training, delivering significant increases, including more than 106,000 people signing up for free vocational training and apprenticeships under the Targeted Training and Apprenticeships Fund since the fund was set up last July. We want to build on this and encourage employers to hire, train and upskill more New Zealanders to fill skill shortages, which will bring benefits in productivity, innovation and help address New Zealand's infrastructure challenges. We're also making sure we take a longer-term view of New Zealand's immigration needs. The Productivity Commission inquiry into immigration will help give us a longer-term insight while we make more immediate adjustments for post-COVID recovery. And we'll be engaging with you over the coming months to test our thinking. Of course, an immigration reset process alone isn't the solution to all our economic objectives. This work ties in with other government initiatives to boost skills and training and productivity, like the review of vocational education, regional skills leadership groups and industry transformation plans. Part of the aim of the reset is to complement those sorts of initiatives and reinforce with employers that New Zealand's direction of travel so they can plan accordingly. When our borders open fully again, we can't afford to simply turn on the tap to previous immigration settings. That path is a continuation of pressures on our infrastructure, like transport accommodation and a downward pressure on wages. Since the borders closed, we've seen a reversal in the horticulture sector, for example, where there's been a lift in wages to bring in local workers. We'll be looking for opportunities where workers and investors who come to make new lives here come to meaningful opportunities that can contribute to meaningful, well-paid employment for Kiwi workers. Sectors which rely on migrant labour, like tourism and the primary industries, will look different in the future, and this has been signalled certainly in tourism. Some sectors have done incredible work over the last year to think creatively about the ways to address labour shortages, with adjustments to wages and working conditions, and changes to job offerings and career paths better suited to local labour. The tourism industry brought into the framework of industry transformation plans, which will involve developing a workplace plan and lifting industry standards. An ITP will cover broad questions of industry standards, tourism industry data, innovation and environmental initiatives. The ITP will enable improved collaboration across central government, local government, iwi, tourism businesses and the tourism workforce, researchers and other industry bodies. It will look at ways to develop and trial solutions that could lead to system-wide innovation and improvements to transform tourism. I know both Minister Farfoy and O'Connor want to thank the horticulture and wine sectors for the way they have worked with the government to solve some of their labour shortage problems. It hasn't always been easy, but they've been able to work through the issues. To all those sectors and others, I say keep it up. Minister Farfoy says keep it up. Any and all initiatives are crucial and critical to addressing labour shortages now and into the future. COVID-19 has reaffirmed how resourceful and adaptable New Zealand businesses can be. We saw it in the lockdowns and alert level restrictions where businesses shifted to other ways to keep operating. It has kicked us into a new way of working, and I think we're all beginning to get into a new rhythm. We need to harness this resourcefulness, but it won't be an overnight transformation. What we are talking about is a transition with both businesses and government engaged together, and we, as government, want that discussion with you to hear your ideas. The government is already playing a role in this transition through innovatives like, as mentioned, the industry transformation plans, and we will continue to find ways to support you and work with you to find solutions in this process of change. Part of this transition is also a call to action for sectors and employers to assess your businesses and look to new ways you can operate. Engage with your industry bodies, training providers, regional schools, leadership groups. Talk with your relevant government agencies and, when appropriate, engage with the industry transformation plan process. I encourage you to come up with creative, innovative ways to attract local talent and explore alternative ways to produce your goods and services. Let me be clear. There will still be a need for migrant workers where there are no Kiwis to fill jobs. But a lesson we have learned from the past 15 months is that it's better to be prepared and be resilient to global shocks. With that in mind, this plan is a long-term vision to ensure our economy and our communities are being more efficient and looking for ways to create more value for businesses, creating new opportunities, developing skills in our future workforce. COVID-19 is a change point. COVID-19 starkly highlighted our resilience and our reliance, I should say, on migrant labour, particularly temporary migrant labour. The pressure we have seen on housing and infrastructure in recent years means we need to get ahead of population growth. The immigration system has an important role to play in helping us deliver on that goal by ensuring New Zealand businesses can access the highly skilled workers they need to rebuild and support New Zealand to reconnect with the world. New Zealand is an open economy, and our connections to the world are important for our well-being and our prosperity. Immigration supports our global connectedness and access to talent and knowledge. The direction of change we are seeking will preserve and enhance the aspects of the immigration system that work well for New Zealand and provide meaningful opportunities for those who move here. It will allow us to build back better and accelerate our recovery while laying the foundations for the future. We will continue to allow genuine skill shortages to be filled. We'll continue playing our part in creating a strong and resilient Pacific region. And we will continue our role in helping to manage global crisis through New Zealand's humanitarian policies. And as I said at the start, we find ourselves with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take a different path for immigration while New Zealand's borders are closed. It is a journey that can bring real benefits in productivity growth, high-value innovation, and well-paid jobs, and not just for New Zealanders, but for all those coming here to call New Zealand home. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you. Are there any questions that you want to give to the Minister who isn't the Minister of Immigration, but I'm happy to do my best.
Minister, in the Future Now conference in Auckland on Friday, you could continually from speaks from Security Club on now about the need to move fast on attracting the kind of talent that you're talking about outlining in your plans here. So how fast are we moving? Because they see the window closing for that international talent brand, if you like, on between about 6 and 12 months, depending on which speaker you spoke to. So when are we going to see these plans to bring in the investor migrants, the highly skilled people, those sorts of things? What's the sort of time frame?
Yeah, and in my role, I can't give you a definitive timeline, but what I can say, and in my role as Minister for Economic and Regional Development, Minister Farfue and I are working on this. Like you, I understand that the window will not remain open forever, but I do believe we have a small window of opportunity now, and we must work hard to take advantage of that. So there was work progressing at pace, and as I said in the speech, there'll be more on that very soon. Well, I think there's still some more tea and coffee available over there. Sorry, did I? Sorry.
Minister, what was new in this speech? Was there anything new from the government in this speech?
Yeah, well, it was really just affirming a direction of travel that we've embarked upon, and it was, in a way, just once again clarifying the direction we're travelling, where we are going to make changes, where we're not going to make changes, but also to clarify that we do believe that there are changes we can make in the immigration system that can better benefit New Zealand going forward, but also ensure that those who come into this country come into jobs that are well paying, that they're well looked after, they're not exploited. So there was nothing that was, there was no announcements made, but it certainly set the direction of travel that we're taking within the immigration system.
So why would you have an immigration reset without any announcements?
Well, my understanding is, from what I've seen, there has been no coherent speech that the Minister has outlined, which has basically outlined everything that we are doing in the system, with some more to come. So there've been ad hoc announcements here and there, but what we needed was actually a speech that outlined where we are heading with immigration, where we got to, where we're heading to.
So you mentioned that the number of temporary work visas had risen to 200,000. What would you expect this reset to do to those sorts of numbers?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we have done with industries that have employed a lot of those workers, because we haven't been able to bring those workers in over the border, obviously, is ask them to come up with work plans that will allow them to better target New Zealanders. And let me give you a classic case, and I can talk about this as the Minister of Fisheries at the time when we let the first cohort of Russian fishermen in. What we said is that we will let you allow have this first cohort, but what we expect to see is an industry development plan. We expect you to go out to the workforce. We expect you to sell the benefits of this job. We expect you to pay good wages. We expect you to put in place a plan that will be attractive to local Kiwis, because I think what's happened in the past, Bernard, is there have been a number of industries who haven't gone out or haven't even considered Kiwis in any way, shape or form. They have become so reliant on international migrant workers. There's been no attempt whatsoever to go out and engage with Kiwis. And the primary sector is a classic case. I mean, I, as the Minister of Forestry, I see this as well. You know, there is a group of people coming through who think that forestry is about cutting down a tree, farming is about sheep and beef, fishing is about pulling up a net, and horticulture is about picking an apple. Now, no doubt those are important jobs and right across our primary sector, but there are so many more opportunities that are available to Kiwis, but Kiwis just don't know about them because they're not being communicated in a way that engages young Kiwis, whether it be, you know, at secondary school or post-secondary school. And I firmly believe, having had 2 of those portfolios, and these are just examples, that there are plenty of opportunities if only the industry engaged with New Zealanders in a way that was aspirational, as opposed to looking inward and relying on migrant workers.
And what advice have you got from the various ministries about the potential benefits and costs in terms of, you know, lower GDP than would otherwise be the case, or higher wages than would otherwise be the case, or higher or lower profits?
Yeah. I mean, you'll have to probably direct that question to Minister Farfue, but one thing I will say, and this is where we worked closely with the horticulture sector, is we said we will allow you RSE workers to come through, but a limited number, but you've got to pay the living wage, and you've got to provide accommodation. And so what it allowed us to do is work with industries that in the past were seen as low-wage employers, or there was a perception that they weren't particularly good employers. Now, I'm not saying that that's the reality, but there was certainly perception. And to work with these industries and say, okay, we'll back you. We understand you need these migrant workers. We understand we've got limited spaces. But in order to do that, A, you've got to treat the workers you bring in with a level of respect, i.e. the living wage, but B, you've got to do whatever it takes to engage with local economies. And Hawke's Bay is a classic case. You know, they're now paying the living wage as opposed to the minimum wage. So there have been a number of initiatives that I think have allowed these industries to engage in a way that they weren't engaging before.
Dairy.
Will the Minister be updating the residency program that expired in 2019 to give Immigration New Zealand a steer on how many applications they can approve? I understand that over the last year or so they've been making up informal rules like a $106,000 salary band to get through the backlog of applications.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I will have to get back to you on that one.
Are you able to answer whether the expression of interest pool will be reopened for processing?
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that one. I mean,
And so in terms of that 13,000 residency visa applications, there's that big backlog on those. Is that going to be a priority for the Minister with this research?
well, my understanding, and I think there's a guy behind me nodding, it is going to be a priority. Yes. No. Yeah, I mean, we understand that at the moment it is taking up to 18 months to actually get residency from people who are in New Zealand and who have applied. And my understanding, we're talking to Minister Farfor, he believes that that is too long. And my understanding is that that is a priority, yes.
In the Primary Production Committee last week, the Deputy Director General of Agriculture said the 2,300 RSE workers would not be enough to cope with this year's harvest. You've got the dairy industry saying they're 1,600 managers, etc., short just as they go into the season. What are you going to do about these short-term vacancies?
Well, what I would say is that MIQ, we have limited spots in MIQ. Our number one priority is to get New Zealand residents and New Zealand citizens back. When there are spaces, because the number of New Zealand residents and citizens coming back allow MIQ spaces to open up, that is when we get these workers in. But what we can't do, and what we've never been able to do, is prioritise overseas workers above New Zealand citizens. And the other thing I would say, and the Prime Minister's always been very clear about this, and nothing will change, is that we are still taking a health-based approach to the way we manage COVID. We firmly believe, and I will not resolve from this, that a health-based approach is actually the best economic approach. If spaces do open up, and as mentioned in the speech, there have been spaces that have opened up due, partly to the Australian bubble, then we will allow workers in as we can. But we can't carte blanche just open up our borders and say, okay, come in. We are living in a piece of paradise at the moment, I believe. You look at what's happening overseas, we want to ensure that the number one priority is the health and well-being of our citizens, and that will not change, Richard. And so the number of MIQ spaces, the number one priority is New Zealand citizens in residency, and then we'll move down from there.
And what happens to those temporary visa applications that are already in the pipeline, and do you have a provision to refund their fees?
You'll have to talk to the Minister of Immigration about refunding fees or those processes. But one thing I will say is, where we can, we have listened to industries who say we desperately need workers. I mean, I know there are not enough RSE workers in the country, but we have brought in a substantial amount because we have heard calls from industry that we need some workers. And so where we can, we provide space for industries that are wholly reliant. But again, the health approach is by far the best approach, and we will never resolve from that.
Is it before that the tourism industry is going to have to change? What support is the government going to supply, especially when they heavily rely on these, temporary, low-skilled workers, and they're struggling just to keep the doors open at the moment?
You mean over and above the 600 million we've already given the industry?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, again, if I talk to the industry about where we need to go, I mean, I was at a conference recently, and I was asked if we would open up MIQ spaces for people to come and work in hotels, and I said, no, we won't do that. The industry has to, and we're working with the industry. It's got to be in partnership, but we're saying, how can you work to create an aspirational career path for people in tourism or hospitality? At the moment, there's a perception, for example, certainly in hospitality, it's a perception, and some for tourism, that it's a low-skilled, low-wage, dead-end role, where we know it's different, certainly in a lot of the tourism businesses, but we have to translate that aspiration into reality, and that's by working differently. We may well get some young Australians who want to work on a ski field coming across to Queenstown to work. But again, it's not about paying low wages and providing, far from adequate conditions. It's about providing career aspiration. It's about providing a career pathway, and it's about doing things differently.
How can you have a migration reset when you don't talk about the ambitions for the residency targets and levels, and there doesn't seem to be any mention of what the government would like to see population growing at?
Yeah, there's. I think one of the key messages in the speech is there is a lot of work being done at the moment. The Productivity Commission's doing a lot of work at the moment around what this would look like, and there is still more work to do. So I suppose what the speech was doing is signalling the direction of travel that work is going to take. We haven't got all the answers at this point, and again, as outlined, there is more to come in terms of a number of sectors. But again, this was never going to be a speech outlining everything. How we are going to implement every single recommendation. Those recommendations are to come, and then we'll outline our response to recommendations.
Minister, you've talked about the expectation of higher wages. Does this mean food prices will be pushed up?
I do not think that will be the case. I think what will happen is Kiwis will be earning good money. So, if you're earning $25 an hour or the living wage, that's fantastic. And more people in work, I think, is great for our communities.
This has been about sort of setting the scene. There's nothing new in this. Is this just another government announcement about an announcement?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I don't think so at all. And I don't think Minister Farfoy would think that this is just an announcement about an announcement. As mentioned, as far as I'm aware, we've never had a scene-setting speech about immigration talking about the whole work program that is in place and what we're looking to do in a post-COVID world. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know how long the bubble is going to remain closed or the bubble is going to remain with Australia, and we've got to keep our borders closed. And your guess is as good as mine, and we get different predictions, wherever we look. What we do know is we've got to build a level of resilience into our economy in areas that were wholly or largely reliant on immigrant labour. Now, we recognise that is just not sustainable where we are, but we also recognise it's probably not sustainable going forward, and it's probably not the sort of country we want in a post-COVID world, because as highlighted, immigration got away on us to the point where our infrastructure couldn't cope. And so what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we understand the issues. Now what we're doing is working across sector with stakeholders, with the immigration officials, with businesses, with industry sectors, to come up with solutions that will allow us to build a level of resilience that most of us would argue did not exist in the pre-COVID world.
The Prime Minister's promoted this speech a couple of times. Do you think that those in the industry who rely on immigration to do their job will have tuned into this tonight and come away any clearer about what they can expect?
Well, I think what they will have done is tuned in and seen that there is a massive work program and a lot of thinking being going on that has influenced the work program about where we're heading with immigration. But one thing I will also say is those who rely on, or those who have relied in the past in a pre-COVID world on immigrant labour to do the jobs are well aware of the situation. Obviously they find themselves in, but have also been engaged in dialogue, an ongoing dialogue around where the immigration system sits now and where we're heading as a country and the thinking. So, I wouldn't say, Joe, that anyone who is reliant on migrant labour has not been. I think everyone reliant on migrant labour has been engaging in a really proactive way with the government over the last number of months.
Some work on an area of income support where it's acting as a disincentive for local labour to take up some of those opportunities that migrant labour.
Well, that's one of the things we were saying, and as mentioned. In the horticultural industry, we have now said that if you're going to get RSE workers, then you've got to pay the living wage. If you want Kiwis to work, you've got to pay the living wage. I mean, a lot of the work we're talking about that is reliant on migrant labour is actually quite hard physical work. And so what we need to do is ensure that people are well compensated, whether it's migrants or Kiwis doing these jobs. The other string to this bow, I would say though, is where we are reliant or where we get extreme an immense and significant value out of migrant labour is not just in the horticulture and the fishing and the forestry sectors, it's also at the high-end, really innovative and business and economic development and productivity sectors. I mean, there are numerous examples of people who have come over here for whatever reason and said, I want to set up my business here, I want to live here, and have contributed hugely. We want to take advantage of that because now our global brand has never been better. You know, if you're sitting somewhere in Europe or the United States and you're seeing what's going on around you, and you look on the TV or you look across, you know, what's happening in New Zealand, now is our time, as we were saying, now is our time to actually put an investor migrant attraction strategy in place and take advantage of the fantastic job we've done, the Prime Minister's done in managing COVID and ensuring that we get those migrants in here as well.
Minister, you talked a lot about highly skilled in your speech just now. I just wonder if you realise that unemployment is still very low in the 4% range, and a lot of lower and mid-skilled migrants are really important to industries like aged care, for example. So I just wonder if you've got that in your thinking, because all I hear is highly skilled.
So what I've been talking about is I think I've sort of covered the gambit actually, but again, the aged care sector is a classic case. You know, we are reliant on migrant labour in the aged care sector, and correct me if I'm wrong there, but certainly that's my experience, and they do a fantastic job of that, there is no doubt. But we've got to ask ourselves is why are Kiwis not attracted to those sorts of jobs? Is it because those companies have never gone out and sold the vision of what you could do or what the job is like, or is it because the wages are too low? I'm not too sure, but this is sort of the common theme of the whole speech, and that is that industries that have become reliant or predominantly reliant on migrant labour are now going to have to take a good hard look at how they actually attract Kiwis, whilst, as mentioned, whilst also understanding that when the borders open, there will be migrant labour coming in, and we will always use migrant labour to fill skill shortages. But in order to build a level of resilience, I think we now need to ask, how can I attract New Zealanders into this profession? Okay.
There's currently 1,000 rooms free in MIQ for the next month. Why don't you use that space to fill these gaps that so many employers are saying they have right now?
Yeah, I think Minister Hipkins has been quite clear that if you have workers that fit the gap, that want to come into New Zealand, and he's also been saying to Kiwis, the message has been loud and clear, if you're a Kiwi, you want to come home, you've struggled in the last few months, now is the time to come home. And so the one thing you do, you'll be aware of, Bernard, is the reason that a lot of those spaces are free is because we opened the Trans-Tasman bubble. Obviously, a lot of planning and a lot of effort and process went into the opening of that bubble and to getting the settings right. So it's not something we could have communicated 6 months out and said, okay, on this date, the bubble's going to open. If you require a highly skilled migrant, then start booking around this point in time. And it was really only once we had nailed down the process to the point where we could be really confident that we were protecting the safety and the health and well-being of our communities, could we go out. So it has, in a way, I acknowledge, not given the length of time that allows a lot of these guys to plan, but that is just the nature of the beast. But what we are saying, Bernard, and I know I've heard Minister Hipkins say this a lot, is if you're a Kiwi overseas, come home now, for goodness sake.
So are you going to resource the Immigration Department to start working through this big work program that you're talking about? And they can't clear the backlog that we've got now simply because there's no spot. There's a compulsory employer accreditation scheme that's meant to be implemented by November. That's already slipped from July. No one I speak to has any confidence, and I don't mean this is a slight immigration. I think they're dreadfully under-resourced at the moment, or they've got problems with their resourcing and digitisation because it's all done on paper. Are you going to spend the money to help clear these backlogs and use things like the MIQ facilities, which have never run at anything like capacity, and use them properly to enable this flow of people that we do actually still need?
I think I would be in grave trouble if I didn't channel Minister Robinson and say the budget is coming out this week and you'll have to wait and see what is going. Craig's nodding, you know that. So, in terms of the resourcing of immigration, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until the budget is read later on this week. Yeah, but thank you very much for coming along, much appreciated.